Welcome to Black Angus Reviews. Today, we're going to take a look at Spawn Resurrection, as it speaks to my atheist soul. I know it sounds paradoxical or oxymoronic, but bear with me. Spawn Resurrection follows Spawn issue 250, the return of the original Hell Spawn, Al Simmons, and is a one-shot to catch us up on some vital information about Al's motivation. If you proceed to the next issue, you'll know it just fine, but it feels rather lacking, and Todd even hints repeatedly that references are from this issue. Spawn Resurrection brings us to Al, crucified for eternity, a self-torture, after having committed suicide in issue 185. A dog walks up and tells him to come down. It has something to tell him. Al, harshly embittered, has no patience or use for this dog, but eventually follows. The dog hints at what we later realize it's God, coming to Al in a form familiar to him when he was last truly innocent. God then explains to Al the truth of creation, that there was nothing, and she brought about existence and the earth, all perfect and predetermined, altogether pointless. So she made humanity flawed, and to prevent knowing the end of all, chose to forget, hiding that truth away from herself, but unknowingly forgetting the war to come. When we transition to news coverage of riots or protesters by a conservative pundit, a young black man was shot in the back after robbing a convenience store. Signs are seen like "hands up, don't shoot," "I can't breathe," and more, all hearkening back to Trayvon Martin and other police on black fatalities. The pundit espouses harsh rhetoric and refers to this latest social unrest as the Great War of Good and Evil, asking which side you're on before cutting to Al with God, further detailing the real war at hand. With God standing back, a hands-off approach, demons and rogue angels came to the earth. This led to the flood, God trying to purge them from the earth, but failing. God reveals to Al that he's always been a pawn of them, that none of his actions were unknown, and with him gone it suited others' plans because they're jealous of his agency and free will. We cut back to the riot, and Wanda is driving to a charity event when she takes a wrong turn. A protester feels she's trying to run them down and retaliates, throwing a Molotov cocktail into the car, killing her. While Al blames God, God reminds him they both abandoned her, but they can counter further damage. Al then learns that Wanda's soul is in hell, searching for the taken soul of their unborn child. While at first doubting God, he chooses to take the sword of the Spirit and begin his quest to save his family's souls. I really love this issue. The art by JonBoy has a raw edge and grit to it while also maintaining a crisp freshness to it, a balance rarely found. The story is well paced, never bogging down in the tangent story that we'll learn is the motivation of Al going forward. It instead largely focuses on the grand-scale implied war, while simultaneously staying localized to the void God and Al are at. What struck me the most about the issue is the dialogue of God. It had a truly unique voice to distinguish it from all others going forward, and I hope I see it come back as I go through the series. An interesting angle, I'll call it a story wrinkle, is a subtle illusion that even God is enslaved to her powers, asking Al, "Would you rather I showed you your future, where you'd be imprisoned by fate, or would you rather be free?" So what spoke to my proverbial atheist soul in Spawn Resurrection? As an atheist, my religious background and formed worldview came from Christendom, from my mother being in the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses till I was 6, through all the Enlightenment denominations, to Protestant liturgical churches, to finally becoming Catholic. Eventually, the rhetoric of Pope Francis, in my view, opened my eyes and led me along a path to eventual atheism, but sympathetic and agreeing with various views even still in the Christian faith. I've always had a problem with the creation story, as it seems clear it's not a mystic telling of the origins of life, but a hard-pressed reality. Various things like evolution, the Big Bang, the Urey Miller experiment, and more, to me, say things started a very different way, and all imperfect and imprecise. I've also had a huge problem with the existence of sin from a perfect origin. We'll get back to that shortly. The God character in this issue really channeled a view of the Christian deity that could make a lot of sense to me. The God who flicked the first domino and then sat back and watched what happened. But with all the meddling he's done with various saints in and after the Bible timeline, that's not how it'd work. It's cool that Paul Jenkins, the writer of this issue, thought to explain this for the Spawn series by having God purposely forget so as to not know humanity's outcome. I expect that God won't seem so benevolent, though, with this choice going forward, as this narrative is very reminiscent of the film Memento. In that film, an amnesiac patient is tracking down his wife's murderer. Going off clues he's tattooed on himself to speed his investigation. In the end, we learn he's already achieved his goal and disposes of certain truths that he'll forget the next day, all to keep himself going. It's a film that perplexes me, trying to figure out if his soul would be guilty on Judgment Day, as he's a new person daily. Here in Spawn Resurrection, I find a character in God who doesn't get that benefit. Whether they forget or not, they made everything with the knowledge of the end, so it's all predetermined, whether they want to remember or not, thus remaining cruel in my view. That brings me to sin and its existence. If all things come from God, then sin is a product of God. For some reason, that simple conclusion evades Christians and other theists. Somehow the Creator is absolved of that, and in this issue, the God character admits that in passing, as she made humanity flawed. There's also the realization that God, a supreme being, had the power to intervene and protect, but didn't. Something reflected on Al as well. Whether purposeful or just writing God as a cosmic character for the morally in limbo Spawn, Paul Jenkins channeled various issues I take with the Christian concept, and it's refreshing to find a piece of media to use as a springboard for that dialogue. So this was an unexpected video to make, but one I had a lot of fun with, and that's from the heart. I'm not here to change your faith, but hopefully this either gave an atheist an outlet or a faithful person some perspective on how we see things. Ultimately, I hope it inspires you to start reading Spawn, as clearly there's some thought-provoking play with religious characters and mythology. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, as well as any comic you'd like to see me cover. Till next time.